Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets and Runners. So obviously this is going to be part 2 of the tier list video that we started a few days ago. Like I mentioned, I talked for a really long time, so I decided to cut it into 2 parts to make it a little bit more digestible for you guys. So yeah, we're going to start off from where we left off in the last one. So I would probably go watch part 1 first if you haven't yet, because I'll be referencing some of the stuff that I said in part 1 during this one. But yeah, don't want to take any more of your time. Let's get into it. Okay, the Hyperion C2. Now, I want to put this thing S tier because I was super stoked on it for a couple of reasons. Now, I do need to be careful here because I said in the review that this was way better for power and spin than the Perseus because it has a C2 top sheet. But apparently the Perseus also has a C2 top sheet. So I can't tell you why this feels so different to the Perseus. Maybe it is just in my head because the day I play tested this, I was playing really well, but I prefer the C2 over the Carbon 1X, the bread and butter filth, because I think, and this is something Yola is really good at. I know Yola paddles are expensive, but they have big, forgiving, stable sweet spots. Their Hyperfoam edge guard is really good. I think it might be one of the best, if not the best, extended Gen 2 thermoform paddle. So I'm gonna put it in the S tier. I might take it down to the A tier. This might also be recency bias because I played with this recently and really liked it, and it played really well the day that I played it, but I do think it performs just a little bit better than the Carbon 1X and bread and butter filth. Okay, Control Air Epic. This is not a paddle for me, but it's obviously S tier. I have said this many times now. I play with extended paddles. I prefer the swing pattern that they have and the leverage, stability, power, and spin potential, and I don't care enough about the significant benefits in maneuverability that you get. That being said, the Control Air Epic has everything the Control Air Invicta has, just in a shorter shape, so it'll be more maneuverable. And I can't in good conscience say it's not as good as the Invicta just because I don't personally like the shorter shape as much. So definitely an S tier paddle. All right, the Vatic Pro V7 non-prism, so unibody thermoform paddle. This would be my personal favorite of the elongated thermoformed unibody paddles, the Gen 2 ones, because I think it has the most raw feel and the best spin out of all of them, which is actually kind of interesting because it also is shaped different to the Carbon 1X and bread and butter filth, where it has a shorter handle and longer face, which I would have thought I wouldn't have liked as much because it takes away from maneuverability and makes it feel a little bit clunkier, and it should in theory make the sweet spot feel bigger, but there's something about the Vatic Pro core and top sheet combo that I just find feels really nice and provides better spin than both the Carbon 1X and bread and butter filth, which in turn makes me feel more control from the baseline, so I prefer the V7. But again, because it doesn't have that softness profile of all of these, bar the Flash and C2, I just can't put it in the S tier. Okay, the CX14H Ultimate. Oh yeah, yeah, so obviously you'll see that there is none of the new Gearbox Pro Power paddles here because we haven't received them yet. So that's a little elephant in the room I probably should have addressed earlier, is that there are some pretty good paddles that are gonna be missing from this list, or at least pretty good. I think they are. They could be awful for me because I haven't tested them, but these aren't very good paddles, unfortunately. The CX14H, and actually I'm just gonna do this with the CX14E as well. I think they missed the boat on these because they came out at a time where unibody thermoform paddles were breaking pickleball in terms of power and spin, and these were supposed to be powerful and spin friendly, but they just weren't as good as unibody thermoform paddles, and they were also extremely expensive, and they weren't any better in the soft game. So unfortunately they kind of got lost in the competition because they got left behind the curve. The good news is Gearbox took notes and released what is supposed to be a banger with the Pro Power paddles. So yeah, edgeless, so they do feel really quick and maneuverable, which is nice, but I just don't think power and spin is adequate for what style of paddle they're supposed to be, and the control isn't good enough either. Okay, Carbon 3X. So I know I said that the Epic I wouldn't put any lower than the Invicta based off of my personal feeling. Here's why I am going to put the Carbon 3X in the B tier and not the A tier. Because I think if you're going for the playability that these Gen 2 thermoformed unibody paddles provide, which is the ultimate power and spin, I wouldn't recommend going for something shorter, because shorter paddles are paddles that really come into their own at the net. So these are great for one thing in particular at the net, and that's pop, because they're thermoform unibodies, so They're very poppy. But other than that, they lack so much compared to softer paddles for dinking. So I think in terms of performance, it's the longer thermoformed unibody paddles that are slightly better than the shorter ones. That is kind of my opinion on the matter, but I would be curious to know what you all think. This might be a controversial one, who knows? Okay, the 6-0 double black diamond. Now, obviously that's an S tier paddle. We're not gonna order the flash or double black diamond in terms of which one I prefer. These are both insanely good paddles because, again, same thing I said about the flash. Hybrid shape, thermoform unibodies, you get power and spin. I do think the double black diamond is a little bit softer than the flash, which will take away from its power and a tiny bit of its spin. Now, obviously, I'm not like John Q and Pickleball Studio. I don't do the spin test, so I can't back that up with facts, but it's just a feel thing because the double black diamond is a little bit softer, but that softness makes it perform better for dinking, drops, and resets. So pick your poison with this one, but they are extremely similar paddles and probably the two best paddles for spin right now. All right, the Halo XL. I put the Max in the C tier. I'll probably put I'll put the Halo XL in the C tier as well. So obviously you directly compare this to like a Zane Navratil or a Prism V7 because they're kind of that classic raw paddle that isn't thermoformed. And I do think the Zane Navratil is more spin friendly, so better in that regard. And I think the Prism V7 is also better. It's more stable, it has better feel to me, and I think it does have better spin than the Halo XL and Halo Max. These are very good paddles. I don't know that they're as good as their competition with this guy here and this guy here, so I'll put them in C tier. The Carbon 3X, this is an A tier paddle. Pick your poison of if you want a longer paddle face or a shorter paddle face. What does one give you over the other? Well, obviously if the paddle face is shorter, you're gonna have more maneuverability because the handle is way more aerodynamic than the paddle. But a longer paddle face will also give you a sweet spot that comes down just a little bit longer, so it's more forgiving. What does that give you in the long run? A little bit more spin on the Carbon 1X shape because you can whip it through contact faster, but then more forgiving feel, especially in the soft game, on the Carbon 3X. So I really can't say which is better, just different. The Proline Energy. I haven't played much with this paddle, but I have played enough to put it on this list. I can't put this paddle S tier. Now, that's probably gonna be controversial because I know a lot of people like this thing, but I do have a problem with going too long. I get it because the longer you go, the more leverage, the more power, the more spin, but at some point, it's too long because you just lose too much maneuverability. And because with pickleball, you want to get up to the net as soon as possible. This paddle performs extremely well from the baseline because it's so consistent, stable, powerful, spin friendly, etc. But it's just not quick enough for net play. Now it is faster than you would expect for something this long, but you can't defy physics either. It doesn't have the same pivot point as shorter paddles. It's just going to feel clunkier no matter what. So I think it's just a little bit too long. It performs really well in ground strokes. It has all the benefits of the Proline Energy S in terms of that slightly softer feel compared to classic Gen 2 thermoform paddles, but I can't put it S tier because I do think it's a little bit limited in its speed at the net, which is just too important for pickleball. Okay, so the Model E Elite. This is another classic Gen 2 thermoform paddle. Now, this is a super hard hitting paddle. Like, it obliterates the ball. It's got one of the most poppy, powerful faces. The problem I have with this thing is that paddle face comes down really low, so you can't whip it through contact. It feels clunky, let's just put it that way. It doesn't have a very nice feeling pivot point to put spin on the ball. The Carbon 3X definitely feels a little clunky as well, but I felt that this one was more clunky. I actually think this one has a higher swing rate in general, which is also probably why. So yeah, power is fantastic, but don't get enough spin for the amount of power it generates, so I just can't control it as well. So I'm gonna put it in the B tier compared to the other elongated Gen 2 thermos, but it's a good paddle. The Scorpius. Okay. Oh, the Perseus is right there. Okay, funny. You know what? Let's actually talk about the Perseus first. Now, where do I put the Perseus? Because this is kind of the most hyped paddle of the year with good reason. Ben Johns uses it, and in the marketing material, we got excited because it was thermoformed unibody, so we all thought it would perform like these ones. Problem is, on court, it didn't really. So there's a spin problem on this paddle. I would say it's a spin problem before anything else because, yeah, it's also not as powerful as the V7 as all these paddles. But the spin is the real issue because you just don't feel like you can grab onto the ball as much with the Perseus as those paddles. And these paddles, these thermoform unibody paddles, kind of condition the industry into requiring this level of spin to be the best. So the fact that the Perseus was significantly lower than those kind of meant it wasn't as good. I can't put it in the same tier as these paddles. The one thing I'll say is because it does feel a little bit softer, it is better in the soft game. So I think it's a very good paddle, all things considered, but at least because our expectations were so high with the Perseus and because the price tag is really high, I think we were a little bit let down in general. Now, I obviously have the Hyperion C2, which has pretty much all the same claim technology as the Perseus. I have that in the S tier. So you guys might call me a fraud because maybe these do play similarly and I was just wrong when I reviewed them. Hopefully not, but I just think the Hyperion C2 is kind of what the Perseus should have been, at least in terms of response off the paddle face. But yeah, the Perseus just not spin friendly enough for what I was expecting at least. Now the Scorpius is a really cool paddle. Now there was one comment, because a lot of people have said the same thing about the Scorpius, that it's a super fun paddle. I'm just gonna put it in the A tier for now because I wanna release my mouse, but that's not necessarily where I'm putting it. A lot of people said the same thing about the Scorpius and that it's a super, super fun paddle to use. And then somebody commented something quite interesting saying, everybody says the same thing, it's fun to use, but is it actually a serious paddle? Because I'm not just gonna buy, you know, a 300 whatever Canadian dollar paddle for fun. And I kind of get that, but yes, it absolutely is a top tier competitive paddle because what this one has that pretty much no other paddle on this list has is the best maneuverability I think I've ever used from something other than maybe a Vanguard Power Epic, because as you can kind of tell from this little thumbnail here, the handle is super, super long for the fact that this is basically a standard length paddle. So it has a tiny little face. So this thing is just rapid. I mean, you can react to pretty much anything as quickly as you want. So in terms of maneuverability, one of the best paddles ever, which is not just a fun thing. That is a serious playability benefit. I actually also think this paddle feels a little bit more poppy than the Perseus. This is like the best volley paddle because it's got that pop and just insane maneuverability. It's also really fun to use from the baseline. Now, I get the whole questioning fun aspect of this thing because no, I would never actually switch this paddle because I don't like the slight instability and the lack of top end spin it has compared to something elongated. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the Flash and Double Black Diamond one, where you're backed into a corner here and you don't have time to set up a full ground stroke. This thing is just, you can just whip it through contact super quick, so you can generate spin from anywhere on the court just with that flick of the wrist because it is so easy to flick through contact. So yes, it is absolutely a top tier performer. And I think the reason why a lot of people are questioning whether it's a serious paddle is because most of the pros that we see nowadays are playing with fully elongated paddles, and those do provide better stability. But obviously there are pros playing with the Scorpius too. So I did say I was going to potentially move it. I don't think I would put this one S tier, but definitely above the Perseus, if not just for the fact that this paddle is so unique, there's really nothing else like it. Whereas the Perseus, there are paddles that feel like it that are just better. Okay, it's a bit unfortunate that it's just Pro Drive paddles left. I should have randomized that a little bit better. But let's talk about the Drive first because I actually do prefer the Drive to the Ghost. The Drive is another super unique paddle because it's obviously thick, but here's the thing. The first time I hit with the Drive, Pro Drive hadn't claimed anything thermoformed about this paddle. I think because they released it before those words became buzzwords in the industry. But this paddle is thermoform unibody. And also, when I first hit with it, I didn't know about thermoform unibody paddles and their performance. So what I was expecting with, you know, this thick of a paddle was like a Vanguard 2.0. But what I got was a super, super, super responsive, powerful, spin-friendly paddle because yes, this is thermoformed unibody. But, and there are not many paddles like this, it's a 19 millimeter thermoform unibody paddle. So it does have better softness, a slightly bigger sweet spot, and way better performance. You know, way better might be a stretch, but better performance at the net than the thinner ones. Now, I don't think it's for everyone. I do think the 16 millimeter core is kind of the perfect sweet spot for that style of paddle. But if you do want a little bit more softness, this is a really good paddle and one that I know isn't as hyped, but yeah, really solid. So yeah, A tier paddle for me. It's a very good paddle. Now the Ghost, so the Ghost is supposed to kind of have similar technology to the Drive, but there's a problem I have with the Ghost. It just feels too muted. Like the feel isn't great. I don't feel very connected to the ball with this paddle, and it's not spin friendly enough considering how much power it has. Now the Ghost is actually maybe the most powerful paddle, but this thing is like super, super, super launchy and powerful, almost uncontrollably so. Yeah, it just doesn't have enough spin to control that power. I'm not in love with the feel, which is a bummer because I really like the way it looks. I like ProDrive as a company, but I think it would probably be B tier because it's not good enough in enough characteristics. Like, yes, it's off the charts in power, but not as good in spin as competition that's also very similar in terms of power, which would be kind of these guys here. Definitely not good in the soft game. Yeah, it's got that kind of Hyperion-like shape, so it's pretty maneuverable, but that's not enough to put it higher. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end of the tier list. Now, what I want to do now is kind of run through everything, make sure I'm happy with where I put the paddles. I think I will be. So there was kind of like, in my mind, I kind of had this tier list done already where I knew what to expect and what I was going to put where. But yeah, let's run through it. Okay, so R3 Nova, 100% S tier paddle. That's probably my favorite paddle right now. Proline Energy is also 100% an S tier paddle. It's just like these two are very competitive paddles, like to each other. They play similarly, but different in that this feels like it has a bit more flexible softness. This feels like it has more muted softness. So it's kind of figuring out which one of the two you like better. I prefer the more flexible softness feel, but they're both elite. R1 Nova, same as the R3 Nova, just different shape. Control Air Invicta is, the more I think about this paddle, the more I want to say this is paddle of the year, because Selkirk released something completely against the industry trend, and yet it is a truly elite performer. Yeah, this paddle is going to be a problem for a lot of other paddles. Okay, so the Flash, and I'm just going to couple the double black diamond in with the Flash here. These would also probably be contenders for paddle of the year because this shape is so unique and so well loved and just so good. These are elite pickleball paddles here, like very, very good paddles. Hyperion C2, this might be the controversial one. Just gonna put it at the end of the S tier for now. Let me know what you guys think about this take. Control Air Epic, same as the Invicta. The V7, yeah, that is an A tier paddle for me. Like if you were to have asked me 2 months ago what paddle I would play with when all these kind of softer thermoform paddles hadn't come out, I would say the V7 would have been the one, because as much as I can appreciate the Flash and the double black diamond for the playability they offer, I think I do need an extended paddle still just because of the stability it gives me. I know these are more maneuverable, but stability to me is still something I prefer. The Carbon 1X Power, Carbon 3X Power, Bread and Butter Filth, they're all kind of on the same playability. It's just determining which ones feel you prefer. I think I prefer the V7, but that's neither here nor there. The Proline Energy, much like the Proline Energy S, but I do think it's a tier under because it's almost too long. The Scorpius is flirting with like the S and the B tier, where I think in the right hands, this thing's an S tier paddle. And there are some pros, obviously, who think that they have the right hands for it, because the maneuverability is just all-time great. So yeah, A tier would be where I'd put it. I just don't think it's as good as these ones in all-around performance. The Drive, A tier, yeah, nah, you know what? I think this is a B tier paddle. I just would never pick it over any of these other ones here. I think in the right hands, again, kind of like the Scorpius for sure, but you really need to know that you're lugging around a thick, heavy paddle, and that's definitely not going to be for everyone, and it's not like it performs nearly well enough in the soft game compared to the S tier over here. The Prism Flash, that's an awesome, awesome paddle. Like if I were to just include value in this, it would be an A tier paddle, because these paddles are twice as expensive. A lot of these are twice as expensive as this one. Some even more than twice as expensive, but it is still lagging behind the curve in terms of all-around performance now compared to the best paddles, and I'm not talking about value. So the Zane Navratil, this is probably my favorite non-thermoformed raw carbon fiber paddle right now, because I do think the feel, the stability, and the spin especially are truly fantastic. The Alchemy is a very unique paddle. I've said unique about some other paddles higher placed, but this is not necessarily unique in a good way. This feels like a tennis racket, but it's not good enough in power and spin and touch and softness where it'll put it up into the A or S tier. The Radical Tour Raws are good paddles. They're just not great paddles, but yeah, they're going in the right direction over there ahead, so good. The Prism V7, much like the Prism Flash, it's just if you want something, you know, standard in that price range. Carbon 3X, oh crap. Oh, this is supposed to be the Carbon 2X, not the Carbon 3X. Oh, well, I hope you guys can tell from the shape that this is the standard one. But yeah, let me know what you think if you disagree with this take, because I know this will be a bit of a hot take, but thermoform unibody paddles are better if they're extended because they complement benefits in playability a little bit more. Electromodel Elite, really good, just super clunky, and it's hard to control the power. Perseus, you know, obviously a really good paddle. It's just slightly disappointing, so I can't put it A tier. Ghost also disappointed me a little bit because it doesn't have enough spin. Different type of disappointment to the Perseus. This is like, I was expecting Pickleball's best brand to, you know, hit it out of the park. This is like, oh, I really wanted the brand that I like to release an absolute banger that broke the game, and they didn't. The Halo XL and Halo Max are very good raw carbon paddles, just not quite as good as like the Zane or the Prism's IMO. The V-Core and E-Zone are, again, very unique. They feel like if you have a chance to try these Yonex paddles, give them a go because the response off the pedal face is different to anything else I've tried. Good blend of power and control, but just too different. So yeah, these are fun paddles, but not quite good enough right now, I don't think. The CX14s are, yeah, maybe these would be disappointments of the year, or maybe overpriced paddles of the year. And I don't want to tear Gearbox for these because the price they set them at is probably because of R&D, but unfortunately that research and development went in the wrong direction. These just aren't competitive with what else we have right now. Now, unfortunately, I just don't have the Pro Power paddles here, but I'm sure they would be S tier because of what everybody's been saying about them. So maybe I'll have to acknowledge that in a future video or something. The Poach Havoc 2.0s are actually good to include on this list because they prove that raw carbon paddles are not all the same. I'm rooting for Poach. Hopefully they come out with something really cool in the future, but not quite there right now. So yeah, that's going to be it for the tier list video. This is a ridiculously long video. I think I've been talking for like an hour and 20 minutes. But yeah, that's kind of the tier list for all the paddles that came out this year. I do need to remind everybody that all of the paddles we talked about here, you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca. You can always come visit us in store to demo them. We do have a very good demo program. But yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you guys think of this tier list. I'm sure you will. Let's get the comments going, the likes going, the subscriptions going. But yeah, that's going to be it for the video. Thank you so much for watching.